Greetings from the New York Times Travel Expo at the Jacob Javits Center. Let's check in with Michael Luongo, author and expert. Michael, what brings you here today? I know you've been involved many years in speaking here in New York City, but what was going on for you today?
So there were a bunch of different things that I was here this year in 2017 for. Today I was on a Middle East expert table where I was giving advice about the Middle East, but I was also on the ethical travel panel, which was moderated by Marin Johns, and we spoke about sustainable tourism. I spoke about some of the issues with visiting Detroit and how it presents itself differently from for tourists versus locals, and a variety of different things. One of the big things that was on a lot of people's minds was the Muslim travel ban, actually, that Donald Trump had just enacted, ironically, during the middle of one of the biggest travel events in the country.
Now, what's really interesting about having the opportunity to speak with Michael Luongo is that this is on your own personal experiences that you're speaking on. Many people are here representing companies, organizations, booths. You have been traveling and responding on your journals through books and speaking at events. What were some of the concerns that you wanted to convey? Because you said you were on an ethics panel?
So, a bunch of different things. So I've been in 90 countries, all 7 continents, several books that I've written. With the ethical travel panel, we wanted to look at some issues. So, for example, you visit Cuba, but are you aware of some of the economic issues that are going on and the sort of power dynamics between somebody who's a tourist versus somebody who's a local, and how does that change things locally? The concepts also, both for Detroit and for Cuba, of ruin porn, where you look at ruined buildings, abandoned buildings, and decay, but do you think about the social forces that created that problem? So sort of about looking a little more deeply about travel. Friday during the industry day, I was here moderating the Middle East travel panel. We had about 6 different people. Again, Iran, for example, was represented on that, and we know now with the stroke of a pen, Iran travel may have a lot of problems. I think American travel is going to have a lot of problems with this Muslim ban, this Muslim travel ban. So there are a variety of deeper social issues that I like to look at. Again, I'm an independent journalist, a book author, editor. I also teach at NYU, now teaching also at the University of Michigan. For me, I think it is important that people continue to travel, but that they also have to look at many of the deeper issues in travel and tourism. We know each other also from gay travel and some of my early work on gay travel. I developed the first gay tourism panel here in the early days of the New York Times travel show. So I think what's fascinating about this show is if you just want to be a tourist, there's lots of things. If you want to learn deeper issues, there are always panels, experts, ways to go deeper in your travels at the New York Times Travel Show.
Well, I do want to talk with you about your LGBT authoring with your travel experiences, but do people want the ethics information? Because this is an expo. We've got folks dancing to salsa music, free food, free candy. Do they want that information, or is it something that's so important to you, and how do you get to convey that in an environment that's generally very festive?
Well, there are the different panels that people can attend. So what's great about this show is, yes, you do have all the promotion, you do have all of the people who are promoting their destinations, and of course they want people to come. That's the whole purpose of it. But the panels, and for people who take the time to go see the panels, they're going to meet very famous people. So for example, Pat Schultz of 1,000 Places, she speaks here almost every year. You can learn about the destinations, but you can also learn about what she thinks of them. And again, it's the same for any of the people that are speaking here. If you just want shallow information, that's available. Sure. If you want something deeper, that's available too. There are people who will seek it out, but there are also people who don't seek it out but come across it. And so that's the great thing about coming to an expo like this.
Is that what inspires you to speak year after year here at the New York Times Travel Expo?
I would say that it's among the things. I mean, I think for anybody who is a travel journalist or who's in the travel field, this is one of the most important travel shows in all of the world, certainly one of the most in the United States.
And why would that be? Why is this the most important one?
You could argue whether it's this or Powwow, which is another very large travel show that goes on in the United States. This is in New York, for one. It does have the media brand of the New York Times behind it. For another, New York is a very central point for many people to come. It's the largest market in the United States, so just like New York itself, for anything that goes on, it's one of the best places to get information. You know when it always is. You know that it's always in New York, and again, I don't work for the organization. But I come here every year because it's a great place to speak about issues that are important to me, but also to learn about issues that I didn't know about before from other experts.
Oh, what did you learn at the New York Times Travel Expo?
So, for example, I learned.
With a smile on his face. It's good, and it's coming.
Are you gonna cut that or?
No, we want to know the truth. What did you learn?
I mean, for example, I learned some of the new things that on my panel. Some of the new things that Jordan is doing. They're having ATTA, the Adventure Travel and Tourism Association, will be having their conference there, speaking with people at the expert tables about why they like to travel, why they want to visit new places, the interests of young people. So, for instance, quite a few high school teachers had come to ask me questions because they're going to be bringing young people. So it's interesting the questions also that teachers and other education professionals have for what they want young people, when we only think of millennials as not curious and just wanting to do selfies, when they tell me what some of the young people want to know.
Now, let's talk about gay travels in the Muslim world. This is a hot topic because I interviewed you right here at the Jacob Javits Center. The title alone had the clip banned from the websites. It was not allowed to be on the media. We're talking maybe about 10 years ago because you said gay and Muslim in the same exact sentence. The interview went on to talk about Michael seeing Madonna here in New York City. Do you think we have grown since that day? We're talking about 10 years ago. And had you had any other experiences similar to that when you were talking about your book, Gay Travels in the Muslim World?
So, that book wound up being printed in Arabic also, so I did a tour in the Middle East. Some of it was very above ground, some of it was a little bit more underground for the Arabic edition. That was in 2009 into 2010. Interestingly enough, just before the Arab Spring, when you could see that some of these countries that something was going to happen. Egypt appeared to be that way. Syria certainly appeared to be that way. I think what has changed, partly things like same-sex marriage are spoken about more. The notion of same-sex marriage and honeymoons and travel related to, and the mainstreaming of many of our issues. And this makes it easier to talk about things. I think the Arab Spring has also made the Middle East more on people's minds. The concept of revolution, the concept of thinking beyond. Unfortunately, the Middle East has had to go through horrific things recently, particularly Syria, for example. I also think people have seen, for example, with ISIS, they've seen some of the terrible things that can happen with religious extremism, whether in the Middle East or whether in other countries, but these images of ISIS. So it does make people think more about LGBT issues and other minority issues in the Middle East, and perhaps that has helped, through horrible things, that has helped to change the conversation.
And now, Michael, this is our last question here. We will see you again speaking on more panels, which I recommend you attend in person. But where do you see the future conversation going for travel? It's not just point A to point B. Where would you like to see us discussing as we meet again in a few years and as this expo evolves?
So I think,
that's the wrap for this expo. If you're hearing the ambient noise, they are packing up.
Yeah.
So we're getting a last minute with Michael, so thank you for taking the time. But back to that question,
Sure.
Where would you like to see the evolution go for the conversation of travel?
So I think right now we're experiencing this Muslim travel ban that Donald Trump has imposed. What I would like is, I believe in security and secure borders. I think nobody has an argument against that, but I think that it's important for economies of the world to be open, for people to be allowed to travel. We've been seeing this opening up of things such as Cuba, such as Iran. Unfortunately now, with this decree, we don't know what will happen with Iran. What I would like to see is more open borders, more people curious about visiting other countries, and countries communicating on the importance of travel and tourism to their economies and to the concepts of world peace. And that's why I think these conventions are important, and why I think it's important that people continue traveling.
Thank you very much. Checking in with Michael Luongo at the New York Times Travel Expo. Till next time.
Hello, everybody. Samara Riviera here. We're at the New York Times Travel Expo, and I'm here with a travel expert, Mr. Michael Luongo, author, travel expert. Tell us what you thought of this year's Travel Expo here in New York City.
So it was a great expo. There was a lot of buzz about different things. I think many of the booths were busy. I did 4 different talks and panels, so I was very busy. You can see I don't have much of a voice left. I'm not imitating Kathleen Turner at the moment. It just happens to be this way. And you see all of the activity as they take everything down around us. So clearly one of the big buzz things was this notion of the Muslim travel ban that was enacted on Friday at the opening of this show, and so that was a lot on people's minds. I had moderated the Middle East travel panel on Friday. Iran was on the panel, so this was also a very big deal. But I think what's interesting to me is that people still want to travel. They continue to travel. Various people here did tell me that they had very good experiences talking with people. I know as a panelist and speaking, we had a very curious people who stayed, who wanted to ask questions, who were very keen to hear the different things that we had to say. I was also on the ethical travel panel moderated by Marin Johns of Curve magazine, and about 10 people lined up to speak. We had to stop in the middle because there were just too many questions, and that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. It shows people very engaged, not just with the destinations and where they're going, but the issues in travel that come about on the panels.
Right. Especially now with our new president and all
Yeah.
that. So it's my first time at the Travel Expo. What do you think would catch people's interest to come out here to the Travel Expo?
Well, I think whether you travel internationally, we're right by, for instance, the Nelson Mandela monument that's there because we're by South Africa. So whether you want to travel internationally to exotic destinations or whether you want to travel to parts of your own country, there are many different places that you can travel. So for example, I grew up on the Jersey Shore, so there were places from the Jersey Shore that were here. If you want to know more about New York City, there are places for that. So even if you're a tourist in New York, you can come and learn more about New York. So whether it's near or far, I think that's part of a song, there's a lot to learn here about various destinations. And even if you're a bit of an armchair traveler, there's lots of brochures and lots of things. You can always put something away as the dream that you want to, place that you want to travel to in a couple of years.
Yeah, a lot of giveaways, a lot of bags, a lot of goodies. So tell us, New York City. Mm-hmm. You know the slogan, I love New York. Yeah. What is your I love New York moment? Or moments, you personally?
God, I have so many. Kissing on the subway on a first date, and then the lights blink out for whatever reason on the subway, which can happen, but when you kiss a very handsome man, I'm gay, and when you kiss a handsome man and the lights, it must mean something.
Sparks.
The sparks flew and we shut the power out. That's how powerful the kiss was. So that has happened. An old boyfriend, my long-term partner from years ago, surprising me on my birthday to see Tina Turner at Radio City Music. I'm going to get nostalgic. Tina Turner at Radio City Music Hall, and then going dancing at the Rainbow Room after, which really was a wonderful, wonderful New York moment. He also was an escort for the stars at the Macy's Parade. So I would have Thanksgiving brunch, really, with the stars, which met Carol Channing that way. So there's so many New York moments. And I think one of the amazing things about New York is just seeing stars and famous people on the street. And, I actually grew up in the suburbs. I'm from New Jersey, but this is the city that is our city. And I will always be amazed by Times Square, though it's changed so much since I was a child, good ways and bad. And it's just the notion of always looking up and all the new things and things. But also, what I love most about New York, the diversity. This is one of the most diverse places in the world. And I would say, for Donald Trump, who wants to end this diversity, you're a son of this city, and that you would do what you did about diversity is a shame, because you should have learned so much about diversity. And that, I think, is one of the most amazing things about New York. Anytime I'm traveling somewhere, there's always someone or someone who knows someone that can tell me about any country in the world that I'm going to. And that, I think, is one of the most spectacular things about New York.
Wow, you certainly lived a full life here in New York.
Yeah.
We got to get going, but really quickly, tell us about the books that you've written, mainly travel books, right?
Yeah, so there's about 15 books that I've written, depending on how you count them. So there are 4 guides to Buenos Aires with Fromers, 4 Argentina guides that I've contributed to Fromers, and then a South America book that I contributed to for Fromers. I used to edit for Hayworth Press. I had my own gay travel imprint, which was called Out in the World. So I edited several books with that, and some of them were my own, including Gay Travels in the Muslim World. I also had a novel with Allison Books called The Voyeur, which was a dark humor novel about sex and HIV research in Giuliani's New York. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the 1990s New York. So that was one of them. And then Gay Tourism, which is a textbook, essentially, that I co-edited that looked at the gay tourism industry and the gay travel world, and that was the first academic book on that subject back in 2002.
Awesome. Lastly, are you working on any new books?
There's some new books that I have to do the proposals for. Some of them are related to my current research at the University of Michigan, where I had a fellowship looking at tourism redevelopment in conflict zones. So some of them are related to the economics of travel as places recover from war. And another is World War II related, but again, these are all just in proposal stages. But I'm going to be working on those to get those all in order.
Awesome. Is there a website where people can find you or your books?
Of course. The best website is michaelluongo.com, MichaelLuongo.com. I'm not sure if I did the double L's when I said that, but
It's right there.
michaelluongo.com, MichaelLuongo.com. I'm on Twitter at Michael Luongo, at Michael T. Luongo on Instagram, and just Google me, you'll find lots of stuff.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure
Thank you,
meeting you. Mwah.
Wow. So wonderful to be on.
Back in New York City, and we're going to talk about some of the most exciting things that he saw and where he was, published author Michael Luongo. How are you?
Hi, Ryan. Very nice to be here.
So great. Congratulations. Gay Travels in the Muslim World. This is doing well, I hear.
It's doing very well. It's depends on what day you look, but it's the #1 gay travel book on Amazon.
Congratulations. Now, speaking of travel, we are in what I would like to now say the red zone in Manhattan, the hottest place to find LGBT persons and those curious about our community. But you were in a different red zone.
It's in a different red zone.
The hot spot in Iraq during the war, where it was the most unsafe place for LGBT persons.
Well, it's one of the most unsafe places for anybody in the world. What I was doing, I was in Iraq, and I went down to Baghdad and tried to interview gay men about their lives in Baghdad in the red zone. And I spent about a month overall in Iraq, both in the north and Kurdistan, which you're hearing a lot about with Turkey wanting to invade. And then I went down into Baghdad, green zone and red zone, to do interviews.
Did you find men that were willing to speak with you?
I found men who were willing to speak to me. One of the challenges was getting them to actually come to the interview. My translator himself was a gay man, and he went through a lot to actually meet me, work with me for the interviews, and through him I actually found out a lot about gay life in Iraq and in Baghdad. There were several men who were supposed to come for interviews, but ultimately it became very, very dangerous for them to do so because they could be kidnapped, they could be killed, sometimes because they're gay, sometimes for other reasons. I mean, Baghdad is, as we all know from the news, it's a very dangerous place.
Now, how does one process having seen that and then here being at a gay life expo? I mean, how free are we in America? And do you think that do we take that for granted here, having seen what you saw in Iraq?
Well, I think we take it for granted here in New York. I mean, New York is and you know that, New York is a very different place from other parts of the world. It's very interesting for me to go back and forth between the developing world, between war zones, to come back to New York. I mean, one time, and a friend of mine made jokes, I've done this kind of work in Afghanistan. I came back from Afghanistan and I went to a Madonna concert here in New York. So it can be very surreal no matter where you are when you're a gay man.
What was the most profound thing that you saw or observed while you were in the red zones of Iraq doing this research?
Well, I think one of the things that fascinated me the most, and this would happen whether somebody was gay or whether somebody was straight, was that it's so dangerous in Baghdad for anyone to deal with Americans that for my translator, he could not speak English on the cell phone if I called him. He would immediately be kidnapped or killed. So that's how dangerous it is for anyone in the red zone. For anyone who is an insurgent to know they were working with Americans beyond even being gay. But one of the things that he explained to me were when the Madeira Army tries to entrap gay men on the web, on Gaydar and other cruising websites, even that is very dangerous, and he explained the process of that.
Now, we're now very well aware of the unsafe conditions you were in. Why was it so important for you to go there knowing this was a situation that you would see?
Well, I think for me, one of the things that is very important, and again as a journalist and as a travel writer, is really going to places directly that Americans will not go to. There is a lot in the news about Iraq, about gays in Iraq and other issues. It was very important for me, though, to find out firsthand directly what was going on as best I could by directly interviewing gay men about their lives in the place where there was the problem.
Now, were gay men your specific interest, or was there not accessibility to lesbians, transgendered, and bisexuals?
Lesbians were not really the focus of my work. It is much easier for me as a man to meet other men. There were women that I met in Kurdistan in the north whom I would assume are lesbians, but we never really got into a discussion of that.
Now, having seen this culture in Iraq, what would you say you think could be the most helpful thing to implement change for safety for LGBT persons in this community?
Well, it's very hard to kind of say that in a nutshell because it is so complex. You've got the war, you've got the social issues within the country. The thing that people tell me is that the most dangerous thing for gay people in Iraq has been American occupation. But if we leave, then we create other problems as well. In a nutshell, I can't really say what would be the solution if the country were divided up, or if we could give people asylum, then that would be the easiest solution. But that in itself is very, very complex.
Yeah, it gets people out of the area, but it doesn't, cure anything that's actually happening in the area. Is this going to be all your travel information and your research going to be released in a book form? And if so, what will the name of this project be?
Well, Gay Travels in the Muslim World does discuss Iraq, but it's not based on my actual research there. There will be an article in Gay City News about it. I've done a little bit for Sirius Radio on the issue, and Gay Times, which is a London-based magazine. And then I'll continue to write other things, possibly use it for my books. I am always putting out books, and I may even make a novel based on my experiences. I'm not even sure.
Well, speaking of your experiences, we were lucky to run into you here in Midtown Manhattan at the Gay Life Expo. But where do you want to go next? You're a curious man about the world. I want to know, where do you think you'd like to put your feet after you leave the expo, in a travel sense?
Well, in a travel sense, I'm actually going to the Jersey Shore, where I grew up, tomorrow, which is getting gayer and gayer, actually. My next big trip might be Trinidad in the Caribbean. Beyond that, I'd like to know more about Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. But the world's a big place, and a lot of places, and I'd love to see it all.
Checking in with Michael Luongo at the 8th Annual Gay Life Expo. In the Theatre District of London, England, let's check in with Therese and see which show she saw today.
I saw Charlie. In all practical purposes, this was Willy Wonka, but because of certain legal privileges, it cannot come out in that name. But it was Willy, and it was beautiful.
Now, you saw Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Now, here it is playing in London of 2014. You heard some information when you were in the theater about this show traveling. Tell us.
It's going to be here. It's been here, I think, 3 years already. But it started its third year. It now has a commitment to come to New York in 2 years. And
so what year?
2016. It's 16, and they're already working on what they're going to do. Brian seems to think they may Americanize it or New Yorkize it, or whatever their choices are. It'll be very welcome in our country.
Now, I'm going to gather, because you have some Wonka chocolate that you enjoyed, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. What was your enjoyment level seeing this show here in London today?
I felt very privileged. It was good. And because it was mostly full of children, they were so festive. Everybody was enjoying it, and it actually taught a moral because the boy who did win the gift was a giving boy, and it wasn't all for him. And that's what life should be. And talking about who was for what, I'm just looking at my wrapper, and I guess from all practical times since I was born, a long, long time ago, it was Hershey. I'm just looking at my wrapper. Guess who got the contract? It's made by Nestle. And to be honest with you, I've always enjoyed Nestle more.
Greetings from Times Square, New York City. Let's check in with the star of the stage, Keith Taylor. Hey Keith, tell us what is going on here at the Producers Club.
Well, we just got done doing the second scene to the last scene. It's called The Secret. It's a bar scene here at the Producers Club, and it's just been such an amazing ride because the last scene that we're doing is just me and on the beach, but it's just amazing how many talented actors and multi-talented actors, which they do more than just acting, came out to support me and the film, and it's overwhelming because of the fact that to get that much support, you know.
Now, speaking of characters that are supporting you, who is this film about? Is this your life story or the people that were in your life when you came to New York in the 90s?
It's basically my life, and it's people that came into my life when I got to New York City, because when I got to New York City I didn't have family, I didn't know anybody, and I was homeless, you know, here and there. So it was a struggle, and I met so many colorful people, especially from the LGBT community, where we all looked out for each other. But it was really a hard time because it was in the early 90s. There was a lot of drugs and a lot of, you know, people were dying of AIDS, and I lost a lot of friends to either drugs or HIV and AIDS, and so basically, you know, a lot of my friends were just, you know, they were street people, and it was just, but the ideal of the stage came about, you know, that I put my poetry together because I wrote about my time of being in New York City, you know, in the early 90s and up until probably now, but the most gritty stuff that I have, the most, you know, honest and, you know, to the point and about New York City was when I came here back in '89. But I wanted to put something together and put my poetry with music, so, which I did with my music producer Shauna, DJ Infinite. She's another name that she goes by, but we started working on the music and poetry, and at the end I said I wanted to make it into a short film, you know, so she offered to become the director, and so